The Strait of Hormuz has always been a choke point. 20% of global oil and gas trade passes through a waterway roughly 50 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. For decades, the implicit guarantee of free passage rested on American naval supremacy in the Gulf. That guarantee is now being renegotiated, not in Washington, in Tehran. Before we get into it, subscribe to my channel. Thank you. What has changed? Following US and Israeli military operations against Iran, shipping through the Strait of Hormuz dropped dramatically. It organized relatively safe passage for commercial shipping. The central condition, according to reports, is a transit fee, and the currency in which that fee must be paid is the Chinese yuan. Not dollars, not euros, yuan. What the yuan demand means? This is not primarily a logistical detail. It is a statement about the architecture of global trade. The dollar's role as the dominant currency for oil transactions, the so-called petrodollar system, has been a structural pillar of American financial power since the 1970s, when Saudi Arabia agreed to price oil in dollars and recycle surplus revenues through U.S. financial markets. It locked global energy trade into a dollar-dependent framework that reinforced American monetary hegemony for half a century. What Iran is now doing with the Hormuz transit fee demand is taking that operational reality and converting it into a geopolitical statement. If you want to pass through the strait, you deal in yuan, not because yuan is more convenient, because it signals that the dollar's monopoly on energy transactions has a challenger, and that challenger now controls a critical piece of maritime infrastructure. For China, this arrangement has obvious appeal. Every yuan-denominated energy transaction expands the international use of Chinese currency, builds the infrastructure for a parallel financial system, and reduces Beijing's exposure to the kind of dollar-based sanctions that Washington has used against Russia and Iran. Europe imports significant volumes of Gulf energy, LNG, that Germany, France, and other European countries have been purchasing to replace Russian pipeline gas comes substantially from Qatar, the UAE, and other Gulf producers. Qatar's LNG exports route through the Gulf of Oman, past the Strait of Hormuz. A prolonged disruption to Hormuz transit does not only affect oil, it affects the LNG supply that European governments have spent billions building infrastructure to receive. The energy price spike, triggered by the Hormuz disruption, is already visible in European markets. Every week, the strait remains effectively closed to Western shipping adds upward pressure on prices that European consumers and industries pay. Germany, which has already absorbed the cost shock of replacing Russian pipeline gas with more expensive alternatives, is now facing a second energy market disruption from a completely different direction. Washington's position. The Trump administration's approach to the Hormuz situation reflects a fundamental tension. Maximum pressure on Iran was the policy. The consequences of that pressure: disrupted global energy markets, rising oil prices, a yuan-based transit fee system that directly undermines dollar hegemony, are now the problem. The administration finds itself in the position of having achieved the confrontation it sought, while managing the costs of that confrontation, at a moment when domestic inflation is politically sensitive. The yuan transit fee is particularly awkward for Washington to address. The leverage is exhausted. What remains is the military option, which carries costs that even the most hawkish voices in Washington are now calculating carefully. The bottom line: the Hormuz situation is a stress test for three interlocking systems simultaneously. First, the American military guarantee of free passage in the Gulf, which is now visibly conditional rather than automatic. Second, the petrodollar system, which Iran is directly challenging with yuan-denominated transit fees. Third, European energy security, which depends on Gulf supply chains that are currently disrupted. The specific terms Iran has set for Hormuz passage are less important than what they signal. The rules of global energy trade are being rewritten, not in any formal negotiation, not through any multilateral process, but through the cumulative effect of military conflict, sanctions exhaustion, and the practical reality that China's financial infrastructure now offers an alternative to dollar-denominated transactions that actually functions. Germany's government has no public position on any of this that goes beyond general concern about energy market stability. That is insufficient for a country this exposed to Gulf energy supply chains. Subscribe now, activate the bell, stay sharp. See you in the next video.